All right, so now we get to talk about SAPAL, water management system in the city of León. About 1.5 million people in the state of Guanajuato in Mexico. Project that lasted 3 years and more intensively, and then a couple more years, a few years ago. And so now we're talking about doing work with a large government agency that's dealing with a lot of challenging issues with a lot of its stakeholders. So, what years were the project?
2000 to 2005.
Great. And you were mostly working with the leadership in the government agency.
Yes, very closely with the director, the organizational development director, and the IT director, the three of them.
Excellent. And so this is water treatment in a city that is well known for its leather work. So there's a lot of the problems with dirty water. So they're also in charge of industrial waters and for drinking water. And so there's some
treatment.
In treatment.
Yeah.
Excellent. And right, so you were mostly dealing with government, and the people you were dealing with were also dealing with industry, government, and some civil society people. Excellent. And what years were this again? This was 2000
to 2005.
Perfect. And so what kind of processes, or what was sort of the overall process of what you did in those years with them?
In those years, the first years we did the strategic clarity process, the whole systemic map, and then the whole set of different analyses to understand the system. And later we were talking with them on how to integrate the different perspectives that they had been very successful to do that at that moment. So like kind of advising how to invite, especially industrials and the whole civil society to change and to shift the system with them. And that takes a lot of time because it's a big system, but that was part like for the first year. The whole work that we did in the first year. The second year, it was around taking the major challenge pathways and projects that they defined in the first year, and to work with them with a systemic lens. So big projects like, for example, a second phase for the treatment plant, or a big project to build up an aqueduct that is going to be connected to different states. So the scale, it was even bigger and with more stakeholders and everything. And another one is shifting the whole culture of the city to be like more concerned and more conscious about water and how they were like using water and everything around that. And so we use this systemic lens, and we introduce small stock flow diagrams for some of those big pathways to help them just to see the behaviors and to understand what will happen in each one of these pathways. And one of the things that we did in that specific project for the first time is to link the different initiatives or big projects and link that to the big systemic map to see if they really had a balanced strategy, and they were really looking at that in the different projects. That was like the second year. The third year, it was more to understanding further and deeper how to move forward the whole system. So it was in two different phases. One, it was like more an internal analysis and understanding so far with the different initiative and the strategies and the response, and to take that and understand how that was like moving forward inside the SAPAL system, the internal system. And the second one it was more around this external analysis. So we did with them a whole scenario planning process, and it was very interesting. And one of the big things that happens there, because back in 2000 they were a governmental water management system. When we were like going through this deep exercise of scenario planning in 2002, one of the possible scenarios for the future was that SAPAL becoming a semi-governmental water management system. And the director was like, that is not possible. But actually, the people, the director from the public relationships and from policies, and I mean, those guys were like, that is very possible. 1 or 2 years later, they were semi-governmental. So that was something very interesting to see, and we have to talk a lot with the whole team to really understand what would happen with the strategy if that was the case. And at the end, it happened. And that was like most of the big like work with them was around those 3 years. And then we had some follow-up with them to see what was happening with the strategy, what kind of conversations they needed to have. I mean, the very, very last conversation they were opening was with more than civil society. It was with the rural towns, because they had this big building of this aqueduct. So there happened, in that specific project, a lot of things happened, because at the beginning they were not like willing to open those conversations. But in the case of the industrials, that were the group that they were like more comfortable opening those conversations, everything started to shift from the very first year, from 2000, because in 1 year they were able to move forward to the second phase for the treatment plant. Before that, almost all the water that was going through the process with the treatment plant was like getting out in the same way, because it has a lot of chemicals and kill of the bacteria and the process and everything. But what happened later and what is happening now is that the industrials are ready, and that started in that moment. They were asking the industrial to have their own treatment plant outside their own fabrics and everything, factories and everything. Mm-hmm. And then after 18 years, they have a specific place for all the factories, and they have already all the treatment. And one of the things that also started in 2000 is that they wanted people to be able to use the water from the treatment, the water treatment plant. And that is already happening. And all of that water is like a closed cycle for the industrials. So they are using their own water and with the treatments and everything. So that is one of the very successful things that they have been able to do in shifting the system. And the very last year, in 2005, one of the things that we did was to work with a group of people. It was local government, state government, and different kinds of organizations, to see how they could be like moving together the project for this big aqueduct, because that was like huge project, and a lot of things were like holding that back. So they were asking us to help them to open those conversations together with the different groups that were part of that process. So
excellent. So strategic systems mapping, conversation, understanding, some scenario work, scorecards to help understand and guide the conversation, multiple stakeholders. That's great. What was the initial, what we call the deeper shared purpose now, or the reference behavior pattern, or the goal? Why was it that they kicked off this process in the first place with you?
Well, one of the reasons was that they could see that they could have better results. And the reason I'm saying that is because in 2000, they were already one of the best water management systems in Latin America. I mean, they were not like the top of those, but they were recognized as one of those. But the director was like, we can do better than this. So they were like committed to provide people with this high quality water, with high quality sewer systems, and also to bring the whole treatment plant water in a way that could help the city to have enough water provision for the future. I mean, it was that kind of thinking. So that was one of the biggest things that they were asking at the very, very beginning. And along the process, and that's why we were working with the IT guy, because they were also building up this, what they call the dynamic scorecard for the future. Actually, we visited them like 2 years ago, and they have these big boards with all the different indicators and screens and everything. But we were also working with the IT guy just to see that the information that you are going to be having there needs to be the right one, so you can make a strategy with that specific information. So that was another thing that we were working with them.
Excellent. So from being a good organization, very good organization, to better, and we know we can do better. And in this process you were talking about, what are some of the key insights that you found for yourself or for them along the way?
Well, for them it was a huge insight to realize. I mean, most of the governmental organizations in Mexico, usually they have this outside approach. So that happened with SAPAL. I mean, at the beginning, they were more working towards talking with politicians, but everything was like outside and trying to change legal frameworks and things like that, or getting funding for big projects. But then through this process, they were like more aware that they also needed to have different conversations with different stakeholders. So the industrial conversation didn't happen before, and most of the reason that didn't happen is because they didn't know how to move in a healthy way into that conversation. So the whole process helps the directors, I mean the whole group of directors, to enter into different kinds of conversations with different stakeholders with a systemic view and understanding of different incentives and local goals and things like that. So that was one of the biggest one. In the case of our own learnings, this was one of the first projects where we work with a lot of innovations around how to integrate what we call it like these 3 indicators with real data gathering and integrate that into a scorecard that is working inside the organization in the long term. So that was something that it was pretty nice to see and happening, and that now that we saw the big board, that's very cool.
It'd be great to get a picture of that board someday if we could.
Yeah.
That's excellent. So you talked a little bit about some of the experiences people had from an outward shift to an inward focus of what can we do. I'm starting to think of scenarios, and those are impossible to know. They're actually really possible. So that conversation within the group and how that can shift the group. I'm thinking about scorecards. Were there any other kinds of experiences or shifts you saw in the participants that went through this process with you over the time?
Well, in the participants, most of the directors were like changing the way they were even talking among themselves in the big meetings that they had. And that was also something very important to move forward the process. I mean, and when we get there in 2000, the director was already re-elected for 3 times. And he was, again, re-elected for 2 more times. That's very difficult to happen in a governmental organization for a lot of reasons. So that was also something that allowed the group and the team of directors to build up whatever the different projects and different initiatives that they were just beginning at the 2000 to really get there and stay.
So you sort of mentioned some of the impacts of being able to stay healthy, include other groups, continue to transition themselves to even better and more efficient water management systems. Are there now that it's been many years, other documented impacts or recognitions of the work that they're doing?
Yeah, there is a lot, and we can share some. But there is, for example, some awards from the state of renewable from the state regarding to renewable energy, because they, for example, has now the treatment plant has almost, it's like, I think it's like 85% of renewable energy. So, and that's the way they are working with the treatment plant. So that's they have, for example, that price, and that price is not directly related with what they do. I mean, and the main purpose, but they have one of the biggest prizes that we could say here is that they have this big prize for the Consejo Mundial del Agua, the Water Council, World Water Council, or something like that, twice. And for different, for example, they already have this first prize at the national level as a water system, as a water management system. So, and there is a long list of different
and those are available on the website that are connected to the knowledge base too, so that's great.
And one of the things that we also have as evidence is that at the very beginning in 2000, they were having things like, for example, the coverage of the city. It was 81%, that is a very good coverage. But because they were looking for getting water to everybody in the city and all the time, then today is around 98% of population. So they are like getting there to the 100%.
That's great. Anything else that you want to share with the impacts or insights from this project?
But just, you can find a lot of different things about this specific project because they have their own page. But it's just that they had like a big steps in efficiency and coverage and what they call the water losses that nobody knows where that's happened. I mean, but that happens. I mean, they lost water. So all those indicators has been like improving along the years, and this is a big. It is not like a big system as a company because it is. I mean, it's a kind of a medium-sized company, but the system they are holding is very big. So it has been like 18 years since that moment. And they have, like, in the way they are talking about the strategies, they are still holding that system that they want to shift. I mean, the culture, the getting water to everybody all the time, and the alliance and partnerships with different groups. I mean, and infrastructure for people. But one of the things that they have done, and I think that's a great evidence point, is that the extraction of water has been going down, but the coverage is going up. So they are already being able to shift the whole game because they have this treatment plant and everything. So they're moving there.
That's great. Water systems in Mexico with Annabelle Membria. Thank you.